Welcome to another episode of Pit Lane Parlay.
Welcome to another episode of Pit Lane Parlay. My name is host Mike Jokum. Joining me today is Billy Glavin. Billy owns JRIII Racing. So, Billy, how are you and how are you holding up right now?
I'm doing pretty well. Everyone in my family and at my shop is healthy, so I can't ask for more, I guess, on that front. And we're just trying to stay busy and do the best we can, follow the guidelines, but try to be a little productive here where we can. And get ready to go racing again.
So during this downtime, how does a race team, and I know you guys also do some work on some historic cars and vintage cars and whatnot, how do you stay as busy as possible?
So on our pro side, so I'm fortunate that my business is fairly diversified inside of racing. So once racing shut down, we were kind of shut down from going to the track. But I take care of, besides my LMP3 cars, so I have two that I own and a third that I host and run logistics for, which is the Nelson team out of the UK. I also have anywhere between 18 to 25 vintage cars that I rotate around and take care of and do projects on. So right now we are tackling a lot of our long-term shop project cars that we use. Usually we do fill-in work between events and try to get the cars done as quick as we can. Now we're able to really kind of focus on those more or less full-time with the limited staff that I have coming in. So what I've done is we have a 10,000 square foot shop here. I have 6 full-time guys that are usually on the floor. What I do now is I bring 2 of them in at a time, 5-hour shifts, no overlap between shifts with a full disinfect between each shift, and they each work on their own projects, so they're not working together, different parts of the shop, and that way they can stay safe and we can also still get some stuff done. So we have some pretty major rebuilds and restorations that we're kind of planning on doing throughout the calendar year that we're now trying to get done, before we go back racing.
Makes sense. And real quick, before I dive into the racing, working on some vintage cars, what is your favorite vintage car that you've had the opportunity to work on?
Wow, that's a tough one. So we have some pretty impressive machinery in the shop right now. We have a Pratt & Miller built C5R Corvette that finished second at Le Mans in 2003 that we are doing a full, I don't want to say a full restoration, but we're replumbing the whole car. So we've basically taken the whole car apart to run all new lines, oil, water, gas, fuel lines. That's a very cool car for being a quote unquote street car. It's probably only the frame rails are the street car of the whole thing. That's been a lot of fun to work on. We have a couple old Grand Am cars. We have a tube frame, JRIII built tube frame car that is BMW bodied that Turner raced in Grand Am from 2009 to 2013. That's a very cool car, very unique car. We like taking that out to the track because it looks exactly like a street car.
Yeah.
BMW, it's a E92 M3, but it sounds and drives nothing like a street car. And as soon as you open the hood, everyone realizes that that's not a BMW. So that's a lot of fun to work on. That gets a lot of looks when we take it places. So I don't know if I could pick a favorite. I like them all. They're all different eras of motorsports. We have our oldest car that we take care of on a regular basis is a 1971 Ferrari Daytona. And then our most modern vintage car is a Weaver Racing Concepts Dodge Challenger Trans Am car that raced actively in Trans Am and could still technically race in Trans Am, but my customers bought it to run it in vintage.
That all sounds amazing, and I'm a little jealous of everybody that gets to drive one of those. But so previous to your current motorsports endeavors, you actually worked for Hendrick Motorsports for a couple years. You worked with Jimmie Johnson, Jeff Gordon, and Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s cars. What was it like working with some of the biggest names in NASCAR?
It was great. So I was fortunate enough to get a job right out of college. at Hendrick. That was kind of my first venture into racing at any level, and I was fortunate enough to step in at the highest level on arguably the best team of the decade. I joined June of 2008, and we won 3 championships in a row when I was there, and then another 2 after that. So it was a great experience. The guys at the shop and working with those guys and with the resources that team has, frankly, has spoiled me for life. It's a unique environment when you have that kind of talent and time and financial backing to do what we were doing in Cup at the time, and they still do. I try to bring that aspect to my race shop now, obviously on a much smaller scale, but just learning from everybody the importance of the small detail works, how to plumb the lines, how to make sure every nut and bolt is the proper length with the proper grip length on the shank of the bolt, and making sure the thread is just two threads sticking out of the bolt. If not, cut it down, make it shorter. That kind of detail work you only can learn, frankly, in Cup, I think. We ran 36 races in the year at a high level every weekend. So to turn those cars around and to do that much work, obviously you use a lot of people, a lot more people than an IMSA team would ever fathom using. We had 90 guys just in the 24-48 shop just to prep the cars. That wasn't building the cars. Those were built down the hill. I think at the time I was at Hendrick, there was almost 600 employees for the 4 cars. So the level of resources is enormous, but the attention to detail, the level of importance you put into everything that goes into the car, the thought process behind it, how can you make it better? How can you make it lighter? How can you make it quicker to service? All that stuff I try to apply with my vintage cars, as well as now with my LMP3 cars. We're always thinking of ways to make tools or fixtures to do things quicker, better, faster, just because that's how you can race effectively and maintain the car the way you want it to be maintained.
I love it. So with all the talk of Jimmie Johnson wanting to do a couple IndyCar races, and I know we've seen both him and Dale Earnhardt on the IndyCar iRacing, do you think Jimmie Johnson can be, I don't know what would define successful, but successful in a brief IndyCar venture if he gets the chance to do so either at some point later this year or next year?
Absolutely. I think working with Jimmie, the one thing I learned from him and learned from watching him, what makes him so strong is obviously he's a very talented driver, but his mental fortitude in the race car was unmatched to any other driver that I had a pleasure working with. He, if we gave him a 10th place car, he would he would stay in with it and finish in the top 8, top 5. If we gave him a top 5 car, he'd go out and get a win. It wasn't like some other drivers that, just kind of drove to what the car was. He would always keep fighting, keep working on it. And we would work with him, but he really, in the cockpit is a lonely place for a driver. And I never saw him get down. I remember one year, I forget the year, but we won the Coca-Cola 600, which is the Memorial Day race. And you start the race at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, hot sun. And we had the car set up pretty loose for when the track tightened up at night. And we ended up actually spinning the car out twice in the race before the sun went down. And the car was almost undrivable. And we kept telling him to hang in there, wait for the sun to go down, hang in there. And, even after spinning out twice, he stayed with the car, stayed with us, and we ended up winning the race because it did come in once the sun went down like we had anticipated. But despite spinning out twice, he never let that get to him, and he just stayed with it and fought up. And so I think with that kind of talent and mentality, he can hop in an IndyCar and fight through the adversity, because clearly he's going to be behind on the talent level and the seat time, but I think he can make up for it very quickly with his mental fortitude.
I love it. So you worked at Hendricks for a couple of years, and then how do you go from there to where you are today in owning the vintage cars and owning the LMP3 cars?
So believe it or not, I left Hendrick because I didn't want to travel full time. I was starting a family, and my wife wasn't too thrilled about that, and that was kind of the next step.
Understandable.
My career progression. And then, but the whole time I was at Hendrick, I always raced my own cars and prepped and maintained my own cars for myself and my dad's cars. And I went to a company called HMS Motorsport, where I worked as the director of business development, and I'm still involved there as the director of business development, just not as much on the day-to-day side of things. And I was, as I mentioned, I was prepping my own cars, prepping my dad's cars, and it got to the point where he wanted to go racing more than I could do kind of nights and weekends as a side business. And so it was either give the cars off to somebody else to take care of, which frankly was really not an option, or try to start my own deal, get some help so that I could do it more, we could get more races in without it all resting squarely on my shoulders. And then we started the business in 2016, and it's kind of grown rapidly ever since. And ironically, I'm now on the road as much as I would be had I stayed in NASCAR, which is not always the best thing, but it is kind of what it is right now. And we started out just thinking we would do a couple vintage cars, you know, maintain my cars, maintain my dad's cars, have a couple customers to help fill the trailer. And within a year, we were up to 12 cars in the shop. Within 2 years, we were up to 20 cars in the shop. And then we made the decision to try to venture into IMSA and pick the LMP3 class as a path into IMSA, with the hopes of cultivating some drivers and getting the cars funded and going to race in IMSA and seeing where we can go from there.
Awesome. That's pretty cool. So far in IMSA, I think you just had the 4 hours of Daytona before the big 24. What was that first race like? And whenever the season is able to resume, how do you feel about the prospects of a successful season?
Yeah, so Daytona was our first race as a true customer program. So we ran 2 races last year at VIR and Road Atlanta to end the year. Once we got the cars, we used Chris Wilson as our driver, who came in to help us get up to speed. He, you know, veteran driver, knew what he was doing, and it just took one of the variables out of the equation since we were a new team. And I really didn't want to show up with a customer car, new team, new equipment, and kind of fall on our face, because first impressions are everything. So we wanted to take a known entity in the driver's seat and then let us work on the other stuff. Even with that, those 2 races, Daytona was certainly an eye-opener for us, just because of the length of the race, the short schedule, and then the added pressure of having, you know, 2 new customers and new drivers to the series added in. And we also took on the support role for the other teams. So we had the Nelson guys there. We were transported their car, had both of our rigs there for the first time, had our fuel, you know, all our pit equipment set up. And so it was a great race. We ended up finishing 10th with our car, with the Palmers, which was phenomenal considering the downpour that started the race. Neither of them had ever raced at Daytona before in anything, and they had maybe 30 minutes in a prototype before that at a single day test with us in December. So there was a lot of new things going on, and we finished 10th, didn't have any damage, stayed on the racetrack the whole time. Greg started the car, he's our bronze, and did a fantastic double stint in the rain, challenging conditions. And then Eric hopped in when the track dried out, put him on slicks, and he was able to bring it home clean. So we took a lot of notes, a lot of stuff we wanted to change to make better from a prep standpoint, not necessarily on the car, but just the team and equipment and layout and organization. Spent a lot of time and energy doing that the month of February, gearing up to get ready for Sebring. We went down to Sebring for a 2-day test and had a really productive test, learned a lot. Then we also actually had an opportunity to put the car on a 7-post rig here at Olean's for a day, and did that shortly after our Sebring test. Learned a lot more there as well. So we were actually loading the trailers for Sebring, had the cars ready to go when it got canceled. So we were ready to go down there and felt very confident in our ability not only perform as a team, but also with the performance of the car and the driver pairing. So I think when we get back going, assuming we can get a couple tests in before that, I think we'll be great. Our two drivers have a lot of driving experience, but not a lot of prototype experience, which is a different, whole different animal, especially for Eric, our silver driver. He's grown up racing Mazda MX-5 and then an Audi GT4, which are both ABS-powered cars, and the prototypes, the P3s, have no ABS. So working with him on understanding how to brake a downforce car, not worry about locking up, carrying a lot of speed into the corner, braking hard, getting off the brakes, is just a whole new experience for them. So our goal is to get them as much seat time as we can at tracks we're going to beforehand, and get them up to speed. And I think within one or two events we'll be competitive.
Awesome. I'll wrap it up here with one final question. Again, Billy, thanks for the time this afternoon. Appreciate it. And out of the remaining schedule, Sebring and VIR and the handful of other tracks on the prototype schedule, is there one that you think you guys can potentially pull out let's say a podium or a win?
I think our best opportunity, and I think we'll be very competitive, is at Road America. That's the home track for the Palmers. It's the first year P3 has gone there, so there's not a lot of history with the cars there and with the drivers. So whoever knows that track the best is going to get an advantage, I think, and get up to speed quick. So and it's also being a home race. There's going to be a lot of friends and family of the Palmers there, and that's one we kind of circled at the beginning of the year as somewhere we want to show up and be really competitive. And we have a couple opportunities to go up there and test beforehand, hopefully, at least on the schedule. And so I think we'll have the car in a good spot. I think the Palmers will be up to speed and have a lot of seat time under them by that time. And then their intimate knowledge of the racetrack will help kind of get us over the hump. And I think we might be able to sneak something in on some people.
Awesome. Well, until then, stay safe. I hope you and the crew and everybody's families stay safe through this crazy time, and look forward to seeing you out at the track at some point. Thanks again for the time this afternoon, and have
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure to join you, and happy to come back anytime you want me.
Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely have to do something again, and have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Thanks.